Welcome to the Girl Out of Order podcast. You have joined us for a very special episode today because we are wrapping up a 2-month worthiness journey. Now, let's be honest, we're going to be on worthiness journeys for the rest of our lives because that's the human condition. And so, what I don't want you to hear is that, oh, we're buttoning it up, we're good to go. No, that's not what I mean. And I know you already know that. But today is the final installment where we're really focusing on the topic of worthiness. And we have a very special message for you from Girl Out of Order on today's episode. Before we dive in, I want to ask you to please go on to whatever platform you listen to this podcast and leave us a written review. Sisters, we really need your help to get this message out there. Without these written reviews, we can't build our tribe of Girls Out of Order. So it takes 5 minutes of your time to go on to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen to this podcast, and just leave us a quick written review. And if you would do so, I would be so grateful if you'd take a picture of the review that you leave and just send it to me. You can send it to me on Instagram at the Christine Gale or on Facebook at Christine Salisbury Gale. I would love to hear from you. So help us build this tribe. And while you're at it, if you haven't already joined the Girl Out of Order Facebook community, I would ask you to join. It is growing every day, and we have more and more offerings coming up in the Girl Out of Order Facebook community, including more live calls, more teachings. I'm going to be bringing some guests on, and we're just going to keep building the momentum and building our community. Sisters, we need what only you can bring to this community. So come on in and let's keep this journey going. Let's dive deeper and connect with one another. Okay, so today's topic, I was wrestling so much with how to wrap up a 2-month worthiness journey. I started this mini journey in this podcast as the result of Jamie Kern Lima's book, Worthy, and being part of her book launch and reading this beautiful work of art that she has put out into the world. And I was leading Who Am I Now mastermind with several of my post-divorce ladies. And at the end, they each got the worthiness book. And what had occurred to me is that this topic of worthiness is so critical to women uncovering their true identities and to begin designing beautiful, compelling, gorgeous lives that they really freaking love. And at Girl Out of Order, we are also about building bridges among other women. And what I've found, not just as living 52 years as a female human, but raising 4 female humans in our home and seeing all the interactions with their friendships and navigating all of the difficulties of just growing from a girl to a woman, is that if you do not have self-worth at your core, then you do not build communities filled with self-worth. And if you're on YouTube right now, I just got to say, you just saw a thumbs up. I have no freaking idea why these things keep happening, but it was an actually appropriate place for a thumbs up. So hooray for AI or technology or whatever it is, because that's a really important truth that we have to punctuate. If you do not have self-worth, sisters, then you are not going to build communities around you filled with women that are confident and generous and living gorgeous, fulfilling, positive lives. And as a result, you're not going to be contributing to a community of female humans that are loving one another and accepting one another and building one another up. And importantly, not allowing their sisters to sit in their shit. Sorry for the phrase, but it's a perfect visual, because true, genuine community means that we accept everybody. Every woman is accepted in this sisterhood, no matter how you vote, how you love, what you look like, what your age is, what your background is. And I'm so passionate about this because in my life, I have lived on the extremes of both political parties. I have lived on the extremes of both ideologies, and I have lived everything in between. And what I have found, And this is where I get fired up, is that women have so much more in common than we do that separates us. But we focus on the minutia. We focus on the fact that you're pro-choice or you're pro-life or you're gay or you're straight, or it doesn't matter. We focus on the stupid stuff that pulls us apart as women. This world needs women to band together and to build up communities of acceptance and love, no matter what makes us different. Because here's the thing, what makes us different is what makes us great. So we want to celebrate our differences and build bridges among all women at Girl Out of Order. And so today's episode is critical for that, because I need you to hear this message. Your story is worthy to be told. That's right. Your story is not only worthy to be told, sister, your story needs to be told. Here's what I found. It's not scientific, it's just observational. Women learn best and remember more and connect more profoundly through storytelling. I mean, I'm sure it's the same for most human beings. Like storytelling, think about it. It doesn't matter if it's Star Wars or Harry Potter or any of, the Disney fairy tales. It doesn't matter. Stories captivate us. Stories pull us in. Stories help us feel seen, and stories help us connect. Right? But how often have you stopped and told yourself, nobody wants to hear my story? What does my story matter? It's not that important. It's boring. Who's listening anyway? It's not going to change anybody's lives. Or how about this one? It's too shameful. I can't tell my story. Because if I tell my story, I won't be loved. I won't be accepted. I'll be abandoned. Well, I can tell you, sisters, that for decades and decades of my life, that's exactly how I felt. So I would tell other people's stories, or I would tell only the highlights of stories, but I would never tell the story I was afraid to tell. And it's only when I started telling the stories, as I'm finding out, that I'm too afraid to tell, that everything started to change. So today's message is going to be shorter because I have homework for you to do. I have a challenge for you. I have an invitation for you, sisters. What is the story in your life that wakes you up in sweats because you're too afraid to tell it? What is the thing you've done or the thing that's happened to you that you are mortified at the thought of sharing because you might lose someone? You might not be accepted. You might actually have to step out in courage and tell others the lessons you learned through it. What are those stories? And what would happen, sisters? What would really happen if you peel back the layers of all the fears, which are often not based in reality? What positives could happen if you told that story? I'm going to tell you a story to illustrate what it's like to tell a story that can make a difference. When I was at the True Voice Speaker Intensive in February, told two stories, both of which I had never told, not really. One, lots of people knew about, but didn't really know all of it. The other, only some very, very close friends and family members knew about. Neither of which I ever intended to tell, not in a speaking capacity. Not only that, but I went into this True Voice Speaker Intensive, and I will put a link to the next True Voice Intensive, because if you can get your butt there, it will change your life. But I went in there thinking, I know my message. I know my ideal client. I know who I'm speaking to. I just need you to teach me how to build a speaking business and help me tweak how I deliver the message that I know I am born to speak. Woo-hoo-hoo! Did I learn a lesson there? Because every time I tried to fit what I thought my story was into the hero's journey, if you're not familiar with the hero's journey, look it up, chat GPT it, Google it. I don't care. Look it up, because when you understand how the hero's journey filters into all our stories, from Snow White to Harry Potter to Lord of the Rings, you'll start to then look at your own stories and say, I have my own hero's journey. But as I tried to fit the story that I believed I was there to tell into the hero's journey, I couldn't get it to work. I was wrestling and struggling. And one of the teachers there said, if there's a story that you are too afraid to tell, that's the story calling to your soul and it must be told. And I was like, oh, hell no. Hell no. In fact, the story I ultimately told at the True Voice Intensive and then at the Own Your Worth conference from stage, I wasn't even on my radar. But before we did that, we had another exercise where they spun this like wheel on the screen and a topic would come up and you had like 2 hours to put together a talk. And mine came up as loss. And I thought, awesome. I got a lifetime of loss. Let's see, which loss do I pick from? And I'm sitting here in my arrogance. I'm thinking, I totally got this. I've lost my mom. I've lost my dad. There's so much meat there, blah, blah, blah. And my soul kept going back to a story I never imagined telling. And so I landed on loss of reputation. And that was a really vulnerable story to tell, because I told the story of when I was held in direct criminal contempt by the Second District Appellate Court of Illinois. And let me tell you, even saying this on this podcast, I have like churning in my stomach, because it was truly the most humiliating time in my work life, in my professional career. And when I say humiliating, I'm talking publicly humiliating. I had written a brief to the appellate court and I had overzealously advocated for my client, and I filed something that was lacking in wisdom and disrespectful of the court. And long story short, they asked me to appear before them to what they call show cause, why they shouldn't hold me in direct criminal contempt. My partner at the time said she'd never seen anything like that. She talked to her friend who was a judge. She'd never seen anything like that. We didn't know what we were walking into, we being me, because I was freaking on my own at this point. And I told the story at the True Voice Intensive of what went into that, how I owned my mistake, described the process of going to this hearing in front of these judges, and then described how the judges released the audio of my humiliation and published the opinion holding me in direct criminal contempt, and how I had to walk into the courthouse and hear the audio that everybody was listening to. And it was a humiliation that I had never experienced before. I never want to experience it again, let me tell you. But it was in telling that story and that True Voice Intensive that my soul started to open up to more stories that I have of my life, where I can bring purpose from my pain, where my humiliation can lead other women to an examination of their own lives, where my willingness to own my mistakes and share my journey of accepting responsibility and holding my fucking head up and walking down the halls of that courthouse knowing that I would not die, but I would want to, metaphorically, of course. However, telling that story, even in this small group, gave other women the courage to access their own stories that they never thought they would tell. So I could have told myself, I am not worthy to tell that story because it is so humiliating and it was such an obvious mistake. How could I be so blah, 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 fill in the blanks? I made a courageous decision in that moment to share a story I never thought I would share. And I sure as hell never expected to share it on a podcast because that was a low point in my career. And it was also a turning point in my career and in my being as a human. They held me in direct criminal contempt the day before I buried my father. What was meant to break me actually made me the strong, courageous, humble, clear eyed woman I am today. So I ask you, sisters, what stories do you have inside you that you are so afraid to tell, or that you don't think anyone would give a shit? Nobody's going to care if I tell this story. It's just so small. It's so insignificant. How arrogant of you to think that your story is not going to touch somebody's life. Maybe not arrogant, but short sighted, because we're a world filled with billions of people. There's a woman out there who needs to hear how you overcame whatever it is you overcame. She needs to hear how you owned up to your damn mistake so that when she's facing that mistake, she's like, well, I remember this time I heard from Jane and she said that she went through this and she made a really bad choice and she owned up to it and became a better person, a stronger person, a more resilient woman, that she chose to leave a relationship that was bad for her. And now look at her having a thriving marriage. Maybe I can do that too. Because our highest values in this life are growth and contribution. So I'm challenging you and I'm inviting you, sisters, to ask yourselves, what stories do you have inside you that need to come out, that can change worlds? Words change worlds. Stories transform societies. All the way back to the beginning of time, people told stories. The Bible's filled with stories. I'm sure the Quran's, forgive me, I'm not an expert on the Quran, so I don't know if it has stories in it. I would assume even if it doesn't, the cultures that read the Quran do. Here's the thing, the Jewish tradition, stories galore. Why do we tell stories? Because they matter, sister. And you matter. Your stories are a gift to the world. Your stories are a gift to yourself, because here's what happened when I shared that story at the True Voice Intensive. When it came time to put together my big idea, my story I would eventually share on stage, my heart was ready to be open and courageous, to bravely step through to the other side of my fear and my shame and all the worries I had about my story and how it would impact my children. Because I had built the muscle of storytelling, of telling something that I had no idea how it would be received. I certainly wasn't thinking about the impact of it because I was just starting to exercise this storytelling muscle. But here's what happened. I was blown away by how women in that room were impacted by my story of shame, resilience, and rising from the ashes, because that's what I did. So that's the other invitation I would give to you. When you look at the stories you're too afraid to tell, whether you feel unworthy or whether you feel ashamed or whether you're just afraid, make sure you do a deep dive all the way to the end of the story, especially if there is no end and it's still unfolding. Because here's the other tip. We can share our stories even if they're still unfolding. That's the beautiful news, because the most powerful stories sometimes are the ones that are still being written. Imagine the courage you're going to give to a sister if she sees you in process on something she's struggling to get through. And how much fuel that would give you in your own journey if you knew you were making that kind of difference in the life of another woman. That is contribution. And that will change you, sister. That will change you, and that will change her, and then it will change another her, and then it will change a community and families, and the world will be better for it. So, my message to you today is your story is worthy to be told. You are worthy of telling it, and the world is waiting for your story. There's another story that I never even dreamed of telling that just came out ad lib, because that's kind of how Christine rolls here. You all know that if you listen to my podcast. Was in a meeting with the alumni from the True Voice Intensive, and true confession, I hadn't read the homework ahead of time, didn't see the email, my bad. And she was talking, she being Katie, the leader of the meeting, was talking about, is there a symbol in your life that you can look back on your life, and that symbol, whether it's a bird or, for her it was pizza, which I don't know, I was a little skeptical of until I read her story, but just something that just pops up in your journey along the way. And the way she told her story of pizza, I was like, damn, girl, you are really creative. But honestly, she met her husband when he had delivered a pizza, and then I'm going to butcher it, please forgive me. But the exercise was, is there a symbol that has shown up? And so there are two other gals on the call that shared their symbols, and one of her biggest pain points was coming in second in the spelling bee as a child, and it was very symbolic for how she used to handle failure, and she does a beautiful job telling her story. But then her symbol was an actual honeybee, and she was watching back, she's a dancer, was watching back her videos, and she saw a video of a recital when she was a little girl and had not remembered it, and she was dressed as a bumblebee. And so for her, like, she started looking at her life and just the symbolism. I hope I'm not losing you here, so ride the wave with me, because there is a point. And then the other gal, it was an owl, and she told a beautiful story how the owl has a ton of symbolism. And so she was telling me how the owl just continued to show up, and after her dad had died, the owl showed up again, and how, her dad was just the pinnacle of wisdom, and it was really beautiful. And I've got to be honest, sisters, I was sitting there wanting to poop my pants. I know, terrible visual, but I'm not even joking. I was like, crap, I got nothing. I didn't read the homework, and you guys got to know, I'm like a super, like, you give me homework getting done. And the fact that I had no homework, and I'm reading this stuff, I'm printing it off, and I'm going, what is it? What is it? And the thing that just continued to come up to me over and over and over again was the symbol of the rainbow. And I'm like, what is this rainbow? I mean, I have loved rainbows since my earliest memories. So, I mean, I get that, whatever, but I didn't know why. And here's my invitation for you. I know I keep saying invitation, but this is my invitation. This is going to be my quote unquote homework, because I'm going to wrap this up as quickly as I can and get you on your way. I really hope that you will apply this week. Get out your journal and think back on your life, and are there symbols that have shown up for you? Is it the American flag? Is it watermelon? Like, when I think about watermelon, that's actually a really big symbol for me, because it's one of my childhood was really hard. One of my bright spots is I remember eating watermelon on the front lawn of the farm with the fireflies everywhere and the juice dripping down my arms, and watermelon was a big treat for our family, and feeding watermelon to my little girl. Okay, I'm giving you examples because I'm giving you time to start thinking. But let's go back to the rainbow. So you get your journal out and start journaling symbols, because symbols open up stories. This is what I found out this week. Did not know that. So I'm teaching you what I'm just learning. So process of elimination, they come to me in this meeting, and I'm like, oh boy. I said, true confessions, didn't do the homework, so I'm really kind of going off the cuff here. I said, the only thing that keeps coming up for me is the rainbow. And I started to tell the story of, loving rainbows when I was little, and loving the 64 pack of crayons with the sharpeners. I mean, raise your hand in your car, or if you're watching that, you'd be like, put your arms in the air, the 64 pack of crayons with the sharpener. Who didn't freaking love that? And we didn't have a lot of money growing up. So for me, getting the 64 pack of crayons was a big deal. And I was telling the gals, I used to arrange the crayons in different shades of rainbow colors. And I started to flesh out this rainbow symbolism. And I said that, became a Christian and loved the fact that the rainbow was God's symbol to never flood the earth again. And this is where I started to get very nervous to tell my story. And I'm being super vulnerable here. So I hope that you will honor this story and really keep an open mind till the end, because I want to give you an example of a story you're too afraid to tell, but the beautiful thing that comes on the end of it. So I said, became a Christian, fell in love even more with rainbows. I've always loved rainbows. I doodled them as a child. And then the Pride movement started using the rainbow as a symbol. And I remember getting very uncomfortable, even a little bit angry, because I didn't believe in that. It didn't match with my religion. And I was struggling with my symbol. And as I'm telling this story, one of the gals in there, she is gay. And so I'm like wanting to die because I don't even know where my story's going. That's just the beginning of the story. But I'm sitting here thinking, I'm going to hurt her. She's going to hate me. I'm lose this person. But I just kept going, and I just kept going. And I said, there's this discomfort with the symbol. And I said, and now I have a beautiful gay daughter who I love more than life itself. And I have come to understand that my my relationship to this symbol of the rainbow has expanded and grown. And it's through this evolution of what I believe the rainbow stood for that I now look at the rainbow as overarching all women and being a symbol of embracing love, and how the colors literally, if you look at the rainbow, the colors, if they were ombre, they meld into one another. They all are related to one another. And so I just started telling this story, and I didn't even really know where I was going, but suffice it to say that as I sit here today, running the Girl Out of Order brand and business and podcast, this community will always be home to all freaking women, no matter what. And I'm getting emotional because as I told that story, I'm worried I'm going to hurt this person who's listening. But at the end, do you know what she told me? She said, "Thank you for that story. You have a really powerful role to play in our community. And you can help other moms as they work through this issue with their children and learn to love and accept them and embrace them as they are." And it wasn't a platform I was seeking, and it wasn't a message I thought I'd be telling. But when I saw the impact on this beautiful woman, instead of being frustrated or angry or rejecting me, she was leaning in and listening. And now I've come to understand that from the symbol of a rainbow and a box of 64 crayons, I have another story that I was too afraid to tell because I was too ashamed of where I had been when my daughter came out. But where I am now is completely different. And the beautiful thing is, I can relate to all women along the spectrum. And that's what I learned about myself when I told the story that was worthy to be told. So, my beautiful Girl Out of Order community, what is your story that must be told? What is a story that you're too afraid to tell? What is a story that you have minimized, marginalized, and silenced? It's time to let it out. It's time to open your journal and start writing it out, even if you're not ready to speak it. Because the story that you are too afraid to tell is the story the world is waiting to hear. And I cannot wait to hear it as well. Thank you for being with me on this worthiness journey the last 2 months. You are so worthy as you are and as you are becoming. You are growing and changing and evolving and emerging into the most beautiful human being. Never stop growing, never stop changing, never stop loving, never stop fighting for your worthiness. And sit down, sisters, write out your story, and then be brave enough to step into your story and tell it to the world, because we're all waiting for you. We're in this together as Girls Out of Order. I love you. I see you. I honor you. And I'm waiting for you. Hey there,